right? And the subject is people who live in glass houses. That's my subject class. That, let me clarify what it is I'm talking about, or who it is I'm talking about. Not just people, but people who live in glass houses. They're the ones I'm predicating of. I'm saying them. They shouldn't throw stones. Okay, so categoricals, subject and predicate are both classes, asserts an inclusion or exclusion relation between those classes. Now, given that's what categoricals are, right? Given the nature of what it is to be a categorical, there can really only be 4 types of categorical proposition, right? They have names, A, I, E, and O. You need to learn these names. You will need to be able to answer the question when you're presented with a categorical sentence. Is this an A, E, I, or O? That's always one or the other. And they have, each of these different categoricals have a different logical form. We don't have that logical form up on the board yet. We're going to do the Venn diagrams from Unit 3, and just like the book, they read the logical form of each of these categoricals from the Venn diagram. So by logical form, I mean the symbolization, what symbols you use to express, right, the categorical proposition. Okay, why are there 4? Why is it that there are only 4? So I'm here sort of explicating what Klenk says. Top of 227, as noted in a categorical proposition, a relation is stated between the subject class and the predicate class. And because of the nature of this relation, right, it turns out that there can be only 4 kinds of categorical sentence, right? So what are the 4? Okay, you've got a subject class, you've got a predicate class. You're either, so there's 2 questions to answer, and there's 2 options for each question, right? You're either saying the subject class is included in the predicate class, or you're saying the subject class is excluded from the predicate class, right? So that's one question. And you're either saying that all of the subject class is included in the predicate class, or you're either saying all of the subject class is included or excluded from the predicate class, or you're saying some of the subject class is included or excluded from the predicate class, right? So those are the 2 questions you've got to ask yourself and answer, presented with a categorical proposition, and the answers give you which of the 4 kinds of categorical you have, and you have to be able to distinguish that. They all have different logical forms. This could be the most important thing, as well as different names or letters that refer to them, A, I, E, and O. Okay, so here's examples of the 4 kinds, right? All Australians are surfers, okay? What is my subject class? Australians, right? My subject class is Australians. What is my predicate class? Here my predicate class is surfers. Although let me here say, take note of Klenk's advice a bit later when she's talking about how to specify a predicate class. You have to be clear, to get clear on the logical form, she says, of categorical propositions. You have to be clear on what exactly the predicate class is, right? Her example, I think, is the categorical sentence, dogs have fleas. My subject class is dogs, that's fine. My predicate class is not fleas or anything like that. My predicate class is things with fleas, or things that have fleas, right? So the subjects and predicate class have to be sets, like groups of things. So you often have to rephrase a predicate, so it's things with, or things that have. Anyway, you can read that in Klenk. All right, all Australians are surfers, kind of the paradigm categorical. Subject class, Australians, predicate class, surfers, right? And you're asserting what? Universal inclusion. What am I saying? All Australians are surfers. I'm saying if you're in the class of Australians, then if you're in the class of Australians, you are in the class of surfers. I'm saying all of the Australians are included in the class of surfers, right? All, that's universal, and included within, so it's inclusion. It's universal inclusion, okay? This is called the A form, right? So anything like this. Whales are mammals. Whales are mammals. It's another example of universal inclusion. Okay, I'll quickly run through this in this part. The next one is, the next example, some Australians are surfers. What kind of categorical is this? Well, it's partial inclusion. So we've got my subject and predicate class are the same for all of these actually. Subject is surfers, the subject is Australians, the predicate is surfers. Here, it is an inclusion relation. I'm saying that some Australians are included in the class of surfers, but I'm not like the first one. The first one I'm saying all the Australians are in the class of surfers. Here I'm saying only some of them are. Some Australians are surfers. So it is partial inclusion. That's the thought you have to have about this. Whenever you have any categorical, you've got to recognize, you've got to answer the question. You've got to grasp it as either universal inclusion or partial inclusion. So what do we have? There are, her example is there are people who don't like television. Let's say there are people who do like television. Okay, there are people who do like television. Partial inclusion. Subject, people, predicate, things that like television. Some people do like television, it's partial inclusion, right? Some of the subject class are included within the predicate class. Okay, this is called I. I'll explain these letters later. All right, and the next two are the exclusion relations. This is going to be universal exclusion, partial exclusion, right? Or particular exclusion. Okay, this one, which is the E form, it's kind of the hardest one for many people. An example here is no Australians are surfers. No Australians are surfers. What am I saying? Again, subject. Again, I've got the same subject predicate class. It is another categorical. I'm asserting. I've got the subject and predicate of both classes. I'm asserting an inclusion or exclusion relation between these two classes. That is, it fits the definition of a categorical sentence. But what kind of categorical is it? Well, it's universal exclusion. I'm saying if you're in the subject class, if you're an Australian, you are, all of them, you are excluded from the class of surfers. No Australian is a surfer. No Australian is a surfer, right? All Australians are not surfers, right? So no Australians are surfers. It's going to be the E form. Finally, right, so that's, you've got to be able to see this and think that's a universal exclusion. And that's going to get you to the right letter. I'll say in a minute. And the last kind is here's an example of the last kind. Some Australians are not surfers, right? So what's going on here? We have particular exclusion, right? I'm saying some of those in the subject class are excluded from the predicate class, right? That's the form. That's the first step towards the form of sentences like that. Particular exclusion, okay? So that's called O form, and now we'll explain these letters at the beginning of part 3.